Music, it's a wonderful and curious thing, isn't it? It's like this wordless language that seems to speak right into our souls, right into our humanity. It can invigorate us at times of joy, and also at times of difficulty and sorrow, it can be a great source of comfort. I'm a musician, and I use my instrument, my cello, to help express myself and also to communicate. But when times are difficult, I can also play music, and this will give me a great source of comfort. So what I just played for you there was the opening to Bach's Cello Suite No. 1, the Prelude. And for myself, when I'm feeling I'm struggling in life, which we all do from time to time, just playing this opening chord, it calms my mind. It feels like when I hear the strings ring out, like my anxieties are lifted from me. But of course, you don't need to play an instrument or know anything about music for it to have profound effects. Studies show that just listening to a small amount of music each day can help to reduce anxiety, reduce pain, lower blood pressure, and it can also improve your mood and sleep quality. Music is not just food for the soul, it's food for the brain too. Music has been shown to increase mental alertness and memory. So I'm sure this is something you've experienced yourself. Music helping you to recall a forgotten memory? Have you ever heard a song that you haven't heard in a while? And perhaps it was one that you knew well at a different time in your life? What happens when you hear that song? You're of course brought back to, reminded of that time in your life. You know, it could be a holiday you were once on, or perhaps a flat you lived in, or perhaps it reminds you of a time at school. I know for me, if I listen to certain songs that I knew when I was a teenager, it brings me right back to feeling awkward and all those terrible fashion choices I made at the time. Music can also, when we hear a song, remind us of a cherished time we had with a loved one, perhaps one that is no longer with us. You see, music can help us to feel connected to different times in our life, different places, and also to other people. Studies have shown that when we listen to music, our bodies have increased levels of oxytocin. Now, oxytocin is the love hormone associated with positive social behavior like trust and relaxation, empathy. So you see, music can help us not only to feel good in ourselves, but also can help us to feel connected to the people around us. It can help us to feel like we belong. It can help us to feel secure in our social bonds. So it's this power to make us aware of our social connections that I feel is the true power of music. I want to share with you how this true power of music became clear to me in the experiences that I've had in this last year. How music both changed my life and also through me positively affected the lives of millions of people around the world when it felt like we needed it most. At the beginning of 2020, I was working as a teacher, teaching music to young school children, as well as performing locally as a cellist. My wife had just become pregnant with our first child, and we were very excited to welcome the new member of our family. Things were continuing on in the slow, steady, but happy way they tend to flow here in the west of Ireland. But of course, this was all about to change. Already the coronavirus was beginning to sweep across the world, and it was transforming the world as we knew it. You know, it used to be said in the times of the Cold War that here where I'm sitting in the west coast of Ireland was one of the safest places you could be in the world if there was some sort of global catastrophe, perhaps a nuclear war. It's very remote here at the very furthest western tip of Europe, surrounded by the vastness of the Atlantic Ocean. But of course, this remoteness could not stop us from being affected by this worsening global health crisis. As hospitalizations increased and numbers and death toll increased, Ireland, like much of the world, of course, began to lock down. Schools were closed and all performances cancelled indefinitely. To stay safe, we were told to stay apart. But for me as a teacher and a musician, this meant I was out of a job. It felt like this couldn't have come at a worse time in my life. With our child on the way, the thought of the financial insecurity as well as this uncertainty for the future, it filled me with worry. So, as a musician, I turned to the tool that I know best to help me through difficult times. I filled my days with playing music. So every day I would come outside my home with my cello when the weather was nice. I would sit here and I would simply play. I would play whatever song it was that was on my mind that day, whatever melody it felt like would help me at this difficult time. I also started to do something that I hadn't done before, which was to share in this therapeutic experience with anybody who was interested by sharing and uploading my performances online. So what happened next, I could have never imagined. Millions of people around the world began watching my performances. My social media accounts blew up with people all over every corner of the world listening and watching my cello playing outside my home here. It was incredible. Things grew, and soon I was being invited to play on global news sites like CNN, BBC, and I was even invited to play for this part of the world's most famous descendant, the newly elected US President Joe Biden. So I couldn't believe what was happening. My younger self as a child growing up with my 7 brothers and sisters, when I first learnt the cello, I would never have imagined then that I would have been playing and touching the hearts of millions of people around the world. It was such a privilege, and it was the best work that I've ever done, and I feel so lucky to have done it. But something else happened that really opened my mind to the true power of music. I began receiving these messages from people all over the world. Different people from different experiences, different backgrounds, but they all had the same message that they were saying. They said this: "Dear Patrick, thank you for sharing this music. I've been having a really difficult week and you popped into my newsfeed. This has reminded me that there is beauty in the world and that there is hope." So these people from all sorts of different places, different age groups, different backgrounds, all finding that despite the hardship and difficulty life was throwing at them, all this negative news, music was telling them that there was still hope in the world and there was beauty. With all that was going on in the world, why had this simple act of playing music and sharing it given rise to such a response? Well, when we look into it, we find that music holds a very important role in human society and has for a very long time. Even for early humans, music was an important part of society. There have been instruments found dating back over 40,000 years, these meticulously carved flutes from animal bone. Paleolithic archaeologists who study these instruments believe that music was, for our early ancestors, a form of social glue that helped to bind people together, increasing their interconnectedness and allowed them to have an adaptive ability over other species. Music bound them together, strengthening the connections between each other and building their communities, despite the many hardships that these peoples faced. Perhaps when times were difficult, our ancestors would have heard a familiar song and be reminded of their connection between each other. Perhaps when times were hardest, they would hear a melody and be reminded that there is beauty in the world and there is hope. The recent pandemic has brought about many effects, so many we're still yet to understand. The most serious, of course, the loss of life, friends, loved ones, family, neighbours. For most of us, thankfully, our health was unaffected by the pandemic. But every single one of us was affected by the restrictions that were brought in to help keep us safe. Through social distancing and measures to cancel events where people were together, every one of us knows what it was like for our connections and ties between people to be somewhat challenged or strained, and for our social life as we knew it normally to be greatly changed. This posed, of course, a huge problem for us as humans. We are social animals. We thrive on our interconnectedness. But perhaps what was true for our early ancestors is also true for us today. Perhaps when we listen to music, even when we're apart from each other, we can not only feel uplifted within ourselves, but also feel connected to others. Perhaps music's primary role is that ability to help us feel connected to others, even when difficulty has brought us apart. So as we begin to rebuild our communities after this time spent apart, as we move from social distancing to social reconnection, I want to suggest that we can look to music to help us in this process. We can all play a part in this. If you love music, keep listening to it. Open your ears to as much music as you can. Attend performances when they reopen and support music wherever possible. If you're someone who feels that music isn't really for you, challenge yourself to find something that you can enjoy and make it part of your routine as part of a healthy and happy life. By doing this, you're not only helping to keep your brain healthy, but you're also part of a process that is strengthening the connections between people that forms the bedrock of what makes us human. You are helping society to rebuild and for humanity to thrive. What I'm asking for is not difficult, it's not radical, but I believe across the population the effects can be transformative. In this way, I agree with Beethoven when he said that music can, in fact, change the world. So I'm going to play for you one of the simplest forms of music we have in Western classical music. It's the canon. It starts with just one melody on its own, simple and uninteresting. But when we add the other parts, they mix together, interweave, imitate and repeat each other, and form something that is far more beautiful together. So I hope this time ahead of us can be a time of reconnection, and that music can play its part in helping us get there, by reminding us there is beauty in the world and there is hope.